Welcome to Intelligence Briefing with John Moore, where we bring you the knowledge that you can't ignore. Highly qualified guests sharing intel galore. Survival tips for the chaos that's in store. Get ready for the knowledge, it's time to prepare. Listen up, people, we're in for a scare. Intelligence Briefing, we've got you covered. Where the best advice for surviving is discovered. Welcome to Intelligence Briefing with John Moore.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. This is J.R. Moore coming to you live from deep in the mountains of the Missouri Ozarks on Wednesday. It is Wednesday, the 29th day of April. Welcome to the Intelligence Briefing with John Moore. My special guest today is my friend Dr. Lynn Horowitz, a Harvard-trained doctor who has written 25 books, 26, who's counting. We're talking about the events today and the things that are of particular interest to Dr. Horowitz. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning, John. How are you this morning?
Or I should say good afternoon.
That's okay.
It's hard to break habits. A lot going on. You and I have had many discussions about Bobby Kennedy Jr. the last several years. The breaking news, I know you're a busy guy, you may not be aware of it, but one of Dr. Fauci's high-level workers that worked with him has been indicted. Are you aware of that, sir?
Yes, John, I am. I think it's Moran. He's part of the cartel, the deep state pharmaceutical cartel advancing the Pfizer, Moderna vaccines and the cover-ups associated with the pandemic.
Well, as you know, and many of our listeners, I did my first homicide investigation in 1973. I wrapped up my last one, I hope it's my last one, in 2010. And so I'm pretty familiar with criminal prosecutions, and this is very similar to going after the mafia. If you want to prosecute John Gotti, you don't go after him first. You go after the lower level people to get the evidence to go after John Gotti. I think that's what's going on here. They've gone after this fellow in order to get the evidence and cut him a deal, saying, well, sir, would you like to spend 1 year in a prison with no fence or 20 years in a real prison? And they cut a deal in exchange for his testimony. I think that's what's going on here. What do you think, sir?
Well, I pray that is what's going on. It does make complete sense, and it's accurate what you're saying regarding the use of the low-hanging fruit. So they've got him on a concealing government documents, and that is a felony where you conceal documents that are engaged in a federal investigation, which this is. At that time, you're committing a felony, and that's precisely what he did by transferring from the public domain. His email service was under government control and contract, and he basically, to conceal his discussions with Fauci, particularly on January 31st, 2020 through February 1st and 2nd, that was a weekend. That's when the main action, James Comey's looking into it, Jim Jordan was talking about it when he testified before Congress. Jordan basically said that something big happened that weekend. And so Moran, his communications to the inner circle to conceal the complicity in the development of the COVID-19 virus.
I oversaw the COVID virus investments and pandemic scheme. Epstein, Bill Gates, Leon Black, JP Morgan, and their cohorts in these crimes evidenced in the Epstein files.
It was well known that this was actually years in the making, beginning with the Ralph Barrick Laboratory at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he had published about 10, 12 years prior that he was taking coronaviruses from bats. Now, again, a smart investigator would ask, well, where did he get the bats?
Right.
And that's where you go into a very, very deep, dark reality concerning the Biden administration. You go directly to an organization called Metabiota Laboratories. Metabiota was the supplier of the bats. Metabiota supplied the rats to Dr. Barrick and to the Wuhan lab via a not just Fauci contract, but a USAID contract. So that's my investigations, and my reports to Congress have stated this, and it's as fact. It is fact. It's factual. Now, what's interesting about Metabiota is connected directly to the Biden family and the corruption in the Biden family going on in the Ukraine, because the Ukraine had been harboring biological weapons labs. That's one of the issues that Putin had that prompted him, or at least was part of the prompting, to go into the Ukraine, because defensively he could certainly claim that Russian security was at risk with biological weapons being developed by the West, particularly through the Ukrainian energy company that was again linked to Hunter Biden.
Burisma.
And
Well,
Burisma,
let me
exactly, yeah.
You're using the word labs plural. My recollection, I don't have the exact number, is there were about 40 of these labs. Is that accurate?
I don't remember the exact number, but it was
Give or take.
several. It was several.
I recall
Yeah.
about 40, give or take a few, but go ahead.
That's reasonable. And some of the labs were virtually in basements, and the security on the labs is a huge question. The biohazard and risk was really questionable in all of the labs, not just Wuhan.
Well, here's another thought. It's against international law to manufacture biological weapons. So if Vladimir Putin is attacking and destroying something that's already against international law, is he committing a crime by destroying the criminal act? Good question, isn't it?
Right. It's of course it's a major question. You know, you had other incentives for Putin to go into the Ukraine, and it's still, dealing with this because it's never been really brought to light and never discussed and never remedied. So you have not only the President Trump had basically said you're not going to have the northern oil route to Germany. We're going to stop that. And then Biden administration continued that. But you see, the Biden administration, outrageously, outlandishly, unconscionably corrupt as it was, started to engage Putin in these covert operations. And so you had Metabiota laboratories in the Ukraine, as well as in Africa, as well as in India, supplying the United States labs with coronavirus incubators, the bats. And currently I have a Freedom of Information Act request to virtually the main organizations, the main players, the NIAID, the CDC, and CIA, where I've asked them to give me the missing pieces that they have neglected or evaded in their publications that virtually stop at the connection between Wuhan laboratory and the EcoHealth Alliance, Dr. Peter Daszak's organization. He was, of course, covering up and basically hiding this funding that was channeled through his organization for the development of COVID-19 spike protein antigen. That is the, quote, gain of function bioweapon, the bioweaponization of the virus itself. You have to start at Barrick's lab, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Then you have to continue. Where did the continuing process go? It went to EcoHealth Alliance under NIH and Fauci's contracts, and also connected to continuously Metabiota and some of the major players in the cover-up. that nobody's talking about yet. You and I have been the only ones covering this for the last 6 years. Basically, the cover up goes to where you had the funneling of the viruses and the financing for the development of the pandemic. You had that go from EcoHealth to Wuhan, and then the Wuhan labs heavily connected to major movers and shakers in the financial crime cartel of the Communist Party of China, who intimately were connected and partnering with Harvard, the Harvard group, the biotechnology group at Harvard and MIT. They were in partnership collaborating. This goes to Charles Lieber Labs. If you remember, just before COVID broke, big thing went down. Charles Lieber, the top chemistry professor at Harvard, who is not just chemistry, he's bioelectronics genius and ace, the world's leading bioelectronics champion and researcher, developer. He then was indicted for Chinese espionage. This was days before we even heard about COVID.
That's right.
And so he was prosecuted and he was convicted, and he spent 2 days only in jail. And then he fled to China. He's in China now as their top developer in the bioelectronics that our FBI concealed. Our FBI committed fraud in this cover-up.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, right. And how they did that specifically was in their indictment of Lieber at Harvard. They said that he had been transferring to China battery technologies for vehicles.
Right. Well, I was just a
That's a
story.
virtual quote, yeah.
Right.
So is a human being a vehicle?
Hardly.
Well, we are in a sense, in a spiritual sense. We're
Well, in a spiritual sense, but
vehicle of spiritual, human consciousness. We're the vehicle of human consciousness and spirituality. But if you ask anybody on the street, a reasonable person, a jury, is a human being a vehicle? They would say absolutely not. No, that's ridiculous. But that's what the FBI indicted Lieber for. And so you thought it was car batteries that he was transferring to China. As COVID is now breaking and starting to make headline news, suddenly you have this obfuscation of the source of the spike protein antigen connection to the vaccine hydrogel. You see, Lieber's battery technology is required insofar it's connected to graphene, the poisonous graphene and graphene oxide. That's the electronic and bioelectronic technology that Lieber Labs, along with the MIT's laboratory ace, Moderna official, Robert Langer. So you had Charles Lieber at Harvard publishing in the scientific literature, which I've read, with Robert Langer at MIT, who is the main connection to DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Programs Agency, financing this entire operation, along with Fauci's ilk and his inner circle, along with financing from England. You know, we just had the King come visit us. They didn't talk about Oxford University, and the spin-off organizations from Oxford that was involved with the people connected to World Health Organization, pulling the strings on all of this. It's been actually coming out slowly in the news that you have Jeremy James Farrar, the top mover and shaker in the entire pharmaceutical world, is Jeremy James Farrar, associated with Oxford University and the World Health Organization. So everything that was taking place at the WHO that was based largely defrauding us and censoring all the most important information, including the laboratory origin of this bioweapon, COVID-19, spike protein antigen, and then planning for the vaccinations and touting how vaccines are so wonderful. We need to fast track them under emergency management. And the Trump administration went right along with the entire scam. And still to this day, Kennedy doesn't talk about what I'm talking about right now, which really it takes away my faith and trust in both the Trump administration and Kennedy, which is sad because I've supported both for years and years. I've encouraged them, I've voted for them, and I'm sickened and saddened by the cover-up that continues. So this is Jeremy James Farrar. He was intimately connected with that inner circle of Fauci on that weekend that Jim Jordan, Representative Jordan, had come out, said something big went down on January 31st through February 1st, 2020. And what the big was that there was a report, a very reputable report, that was later kind of like, pulled from publishing. It was withdrawn after I read it, and many people like me, I'm the editor-in-chief of Medical Veritas International Journal. So I get these things quickly, and I read the research and try to figure out what's going on here. Well, Prashat Pradhan et al., about 8 top experts in the field of genetic analysis, had determined that the COVID virus that they had sequenced had 4 major genes associated with HIV/AIDS. In other words, they took the AIDS virus and spliced genes from it into the gain of function bioweapon to create the spike protein antigen that made everybody sick, including yours truly. John, I dealt with cancer. I defeated cancer, COVID cancer, lymphatic cancers. Currently now, finally, there's, seepage of intelligence on what I published on medicalveritas.org. 2 different scientific peer-reviewed publications I published elsewhere, Acta Scientifica Medical Journal. I published that intelligence, my own case, because I had to figure out what the hell gives me cancer. How did I get COVID? How did I get cancer? What kind of cancer? A lymphoma. Really, it's called multiple myeloma. What is that? Is virtually all of the cancers now? What is causing all the lymphatic cancers is the same pathogenic process. What happens? You get injected either with the virus itself, which I did. I didn't get any of the vaccinations. I'm not that stupid. I wouldn't take the vaccines, the clot shots for anything.
Me neither.
So I basically had to figure out, well, I got COVID twice of the virus itself. I came down with COVID flu, but I also got from colleagues, they were shedding. They went to get vaccinated, and now they became genetically modified organisms. People became GMOs once they got the virus or the vaccine. So they start to shed the spike protein antigen. I was in their midst, and I got this a third assault on my immune system that then now, faced with the spike protein antigen, my immune system had to produce antibodies. So that's what my cancer was. My plasma cells went haywire. They started to output more and more and more and more antibodies. And those antibodies started to destroy my bones. So I would stretch and I would break a rib. I would cough or sneeze and break something else. So that was suddenly now I have to go to a hospital. I'm basically really dying. And they diagnosed the fact that my bones had been disintegrating from the expression, the hyperexpression of the antibodies that were dissolving the bone itself. So in the past, after I defeated cancer, and I did that largely through 528 frequency therapeutics. People can learn about that on 528therapy.com. But basically, I worked with 528. I worked with a lot of prayer. I couldn't believe, God works in mysterious ways. So I said to God, what is this about? Why would I, your humble servant, get cancer? And the answer was, Horowitz, you need to publish your case. So I published my case study as well as other literature reviews that before anybody was talking about COVID cancer, I was publishing all about it. And those publications are currently up on Medical Veritas. That's truth in Latin, medicalveritas.org. And so basically that's really the cover up that's happening today. John, I'm long-winded here. Go ahead, ask any
Okay, well,
question you want.
I'll tell you what I would do as a investigator with more than 40 years of experience. If I was in the Department of Justice, I would send, there's something called interrogatories. I would send interrogatories to Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, with one main question and others as necessary. When did research on the COVID vaccination begin? I already know the answer from private sources. It began at least 6, maybe 12 years or even longer before 2020. And then I would go to these 3 companies, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and I would start doing depositions with department heads all the way down to the janitor to get to the truth, get people under oath in a deposition and ask them questions regarding the development of the vaccines years and years before 2020. And that's the way I would get to the truth. And of course, I would subpoena documents at the same time, subpoena documents related to the development of the COVID vaccinations. Between those 3 things, interrogatories, depositions, and subpoena of documents, we would finally get to the truth. What do you think, sir?
Yeah, I would add a longer duration for the development of the vaccine. I would go back to early 1980s.
That far back? Wow,
I would go that far back. And here's why. Because the whole COVID vaccine, it's an mRNA.
Right.
The messenger RNA vaccination. That research and development began with HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS was another lab virus, and it came out of Lytton Bionetics laboratory, and it was spread via the hepatitis B vaccines. That started in 1970 through 74, the first case given there being a 4 to 6 year incubation period for the virus to cause the immune suppression. So now in 1976, there was the first case reported. It wasn't the gay flight attendant that Dr. Robert Gallo, who was heavily implicated in the scam. He said that it was a gay flight attendant that was flying internationally that was the patient zero. Total BS. The fact was that he was covering up for the fact that he was the National Institutes of Health, National Cancer Institute overseer of the creators of HIV, AIDS, like and Ebola-like viruses. So they had the virus already, and it was a bioengineered virus. They had it as early as 1974 in the injections of the hepatitis B vaccines given to gay men in New York City, blacks in Central Africa. In Haiti, they used the women who were nurses because they claimed, just like they did with the sex workers in Africa, that you're at high risk of hepatitis. You have to get the hepatitis B vaccine to prevent the bloodborne. So they took the vaccine, they got HIV/AIDS. That's why you had the explosions in Haiti and Central Africa and in the gay community in New York City and in, to this day, suppressed Willowbrook State School mentally retarded children on Staten Island in New York. They closed the school in 76 after they realized their injections of the hepatitis B vaccines on the children had started to pop up these lymphatic cancers, HIV/AIDS-like diseases. They sent them back into the community from whence they came. And so that's the history. Now, what did they do? Once they had that, and they had that under contract, I published in the definitive textbook in this field of laboratory engineered viruses. The book is called Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola, Nature, Accident, or Intentional. I claim now, after all those years of research, although I leave the readers to figure out whether it was either 3 options, I claim now absolutely certifiably, given the pattern and practice of genocide in pharmaceutical cartel, it was intentional. They intentionally released this.
Get a grip on the real history of lab virus mutagenesis, pandemic preparedness, and the schemes in the national security state. Here is the secreted U.S. government contracts under which the bioweapons and immune system destroyers were made. This secreted text has been a bestseller and lifesaver for 30 years. It is more relevant today than ever. It is available through Amazon and Kindle. Here is the evidence for Big Pharma's cartelization and commercialization of plagues, risky vaccines, and deadly drugs. Awaken to this deadly fraudulent reality. I oversaw the COVID virus investments and pandemic scheme. Epstein, Bill Gates, Leon Black, JP Morgan, and their cohorts in these crimes evidenced in the Epstein files. Forget the DOJ's ability to convict Dr. Anthony Fauci and his co-conspirators, including Dr. Morens and Bill Gates. Here is why they will get away with their mass murders and global genocide.
I am not allowed to release all the Epstein files, nor prosecute the guilty in the CIA, FBI, and Congress.
Our hands are tied by unfathomable deep state corruption that has destroyed all semblance of justice.
This is depopulation in the age of AI and robotics. They don't need most of us anymore. Our awakening simply threatens them. Don't be fooled. Read, learn, take precautions.
Now, that contract, what made the book a national bestseller, is I published the United States government contracts under which this took place. And so government NIH grant number 71-2025 was the contract under which Gallo et al. Produced these viruses. And here's the connection. They started working on vaccines immediately. It was in a similar contract in the same book called the Special Virus Cancer Program classified text that I by miracle got. It was a complete miracle. I tell the story elsewhere. But basically, I had now the contracts. The sister contract to 71-2025 was 71-2059 for the Merck Pharmaceutical Company to develop viruses and vaccinations. They had the viruses from Lytton. They needed to develop vaccinations, and they then developed the beginning of what we're talking about now, the mRNA vaccinations. Why? Because the virus works by mRNA. It alters the DNA in what I have been saying for almost 30 years now, 1996. So that's 30 years.
It is.
The first book, first edition came out 30 years ago. I've been saying that this is satanic because what the science does, it calls for life to operate in reverse. What do I mean by that?
What do you mean?
Normally, the way God made us, you have DNA messaging to RNA to produce in the ribosome of the cell more proteins to rebuild our bodies. So it goes from DNA to RNA to new proteins to new life. No, this demonic imposition and vaccination and genetic engineering calls for life to operate in reverse. You get injected with the mRNA. The mRNA then in reverse tells the DNA what to produce. And the DNA then is fooled. It starts to produce more and more and more mRNA-triggered spike protein antigens that gave me cancer. So this is what they have done. It's totally demonic. It works totally backwards from the way God had intended our immune systems to function normally and our DNA to express itself. Now you actually have great justification, scientific evidence to support the Bible verse,
Leviticus 19:19,
which says, keep the blood pure.
Yes.
Do not inject genetically modified organisms or genetic sequences into your body because it's going to cause havoc. It's going to wreak havoc. That's the diseases, the profitable disease cartel. So bring it forward now. This technology that Fauci heralded and the savior, we're going to emergency develop the mRNA vaccination. I'd say before you had what you're talking about, 14, 15 years ago, they were already publishing that they were developing these vaccines way before that, back into the early 80s. You remember Margaret Heckler, if you're old enough, if you're maybe our age, you remember the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Margaret Heckler, came out around 1984 and said, this is a virtual quote, "We're going to have an AIDS vaccine in the next 3 years."
Oh, yes.
It never happened. It
Right.
never happened because, again, this is a demonic technology that causes life to operate in reverse. And most significantly, most suppressed, is that these viruses, lab mutants, they mutate rapidly because they haven't been around for millennia, so they're fragile. They break apart easily and they recombine easily. They recombine with all sorts of other bacteria and virus genetic sequences.
I have a question for you, doctor. First of all, I have no training or education in medicine or science. I'm a pretty good homicide detective, but the men and women who do have 8 and 10 years education past high school in science and medicine, I see two groups. One group says, yes, there are viruses. The other group, with a similar credentials, say there's no such thing as a virus. Where do you fall in that category, sir?
If you read the book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola, I exposed the entire scam of the no virus theory. Because you see, that no virus theory was instigated by Dr. Peter Duesberg, who intimately connects to Dr. Gallo. They were working under the same contracts that I mentioned earlier, where Dr. Gallo and his group at Lytton Bionetics was working on dogs and chimpanzees and monkeys to develop viruses and then inject them and incubate them in those animals. Duesberg was doing the same thing in chickens and cats and other species. So I actually debated Duesberg 3 times on radio live. I was invited early to do that. And I exposed him royally. And the entire group of people that were supporting that thesis, particularly regarding HIV/AIDS, they've died. They all died of HIV/AIDS.
Really?
So so if there's no virus, basically, what killed them?
Well, that's my question. When I asked the group of people who say there's no such thing as virus, I asked a follow-up question. Well, what the hell makes people sick and killing them? And they don't have an answer.
Exactly right. And the same thing with the flu or the cold. I know that there's a psychological component to that. I'm an expert in that field of behavioral science and psychology and immunofunction or dysfunction. It's called psychoneuroimmunology. It's a whole wonderful field. Mirin Brasenko, who was a colleague of mine, I was much younger than he when he was initially initiating this entire field in medicine. Joan Borsenko, a famous author and anatomy expert, hired me to teach anatomy, microanatomy, in fact, histology to medical students and dental students at Tufts University. I know this field intimately. So this whole concept, it's not just in your mind. You have to study the viruses and then what they do. You have the experience that somebody sneezes near you, and then maybe 2 days later you start to get feeling sick. At that point, I recommend taking oxysilver with prayer, 3 capfuls with prayer. Typically, if you feel something coming on, after you do that, it's gone. You don't get sick miraculously. If you miss that opportunity, you get sick. Okay, now you take 3 capfuls 3 times a day for 3 days, no more than 3 days, you're going to be fine. Oxysilver, it's an electroceutical, most advanced. We could do a whole show on it. I'm not going to go there. The reality is there are viruses. It's stupid, and it's actually deadly for people to think and claim that there are no viruses. The viruses don't exist. In fact, they do exist, and there are certain physical things that they cause in the human body. Now, after having said that, having introduced electroceuticals, the whole energy medicine, the whole concept of how viruses are crystals. They're crystalline structure. Proteins are crystals. there's a whole field of science called protein crystallography. So what are crystals? You know, you're listening to my voice right now because of computer crystallization, silicon chips, crystals. And so, you know, in the New Age movement, you know, you've got crystals and potential healing and therapeutics. Well, gee whiz, crystals store frequency, energy, frequency, musical mathematics. It's related to musical math. It's related to 528 frequency that I've pioneered the entire field, the entire industry, exploding internationally right now in the music industry and the natural healing, arts, and sciences is the 528 frequency. It's a resonant energy. It vibrates. And if you directed, targeted it, like you do with laser light, like you do with sunshine, which people know the virus can't exist in sunshine. Same with HIV/AIDS. So what happens? What's happening is that the frequency radiation from the sun, the energetics of that light, just like sound, vibration, can shatter the crystal. You know, years ago they had a BASF commercial with Ella Fitzgerald. She sang a high-pitched note holding a crystal glass, and the glass shattered.
That's right.
And then I think it was Memorex tapes or BASF tapes.
Right. It was Memorex, right. Right.
Memorex, yeah. Right. So that's the same concept now. Now you integrate this whole field of Rife frequency, Royal Raymond Rife, the top microscopist in the world, whose stuff was censored when he presented it to J. Edgar Hoover at the FBI. They confiscated all of his stuff.
I figured out what it was. Doctor, I got a question for you. You may answer privately. There's a number of companies manufacturing what they claim to be Rife machines. I'm sure you're aware of that. Are you aware of one of them being the real deal, or any of them, sir?
You know, I haven't gone through what's happening currently.
Okay.
But you know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that all you're dealing with, it's so simple. You're dealing with frequency resonant energy.
Right.
And the green light is 528. Green light has been shown to actually heal people. It's therapeutic. And, you know, today you see on television, they're advertising the red laser lights in various belts and fabrics and even rings, you know. So they've got now this understanding that that's therapeutic. Well, if you start to look the science, review the science, the red penetrates deeper into the cells and tissues than the green 528 does, but you don't necessarily need to go deep, because what's happening is when you hit it with a superficial 528 frequency, let's say in the epidermis, in the skin, and under the skin there's connective tissue, and then of course the blood vessels are right there, and your body's made of water. 80% approximately is water. Water is a liquid crystal, superconductor of sound and light. Wow, hallelujah. So you don't need to go deep. You don't need to go strong. You need to do what they do in homeopathy, a energetic signal in water, in a solution with a intention and carrying the energetics of a certain botanical or herb, something that has been known to heal and be therapeutic. That is all that's necessary. Now, having said that, if you go to 528therapy.com, you'll see 2 free therapeutic devices. One is audio tracks with 528 and its harmonic 417. Those are the frequencies of gold and silver. 528 is gold. That has been determined scientifically. 528 is the surface, the plasmonic resonant energy broadcasting from pure 24-karat gold. That's 528. It's the same as heart of sunshine, the heart of rainbows, the heart of chlorophyll resonating, giving us oxygen. We're breathing 528 resonating oxygen. That's what's keeping us alive. Now, if you go to 417, that's silver. Silver, a very powerful antibiotic. So oxysilver with 528 is a broad spectrum, antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal immune booster that literally is in sync with the heart of nature, with the heart of the God's given gift, the natural immune system that's giving us health and restoring our health. So if you go to 528therapy.com, you have those two options. The 528 is alone. There's a binaural. One ear has 417, the other has 528. Your brain then combines the two, and you go into a harmonic of the two. That's available for free on 528therapy.com. Scroll a little further down, and you have a green 528 color swatch. So you don't need to go out and spend a lot of money on questionable devices, questionable Rife machines. You could take your iPad or even your cell phone now. You can play those frequencies, ideally through headphones, something that's giving you a good sound, and then you put the color swatch on your screen. You hold the iPad, let's say, the green is radiating your skin, and now you're listening to the frequencies. That's what I was doing, John, to cure my own cancer. I did that 3 or 4 times a week for 30 minutes to 45 minutes a time. I did it while watching football, or I did it just watching television. You sit there and you get vibes. And then that's consistent with everything that we now know. You know, recently it's been again said that the easiest, least expensive cure for all illnesses is to walk barefoot on the damp morning dew, on your green grass, your lawn, because your body, again, is so filled with superconductive water. Your skin goes right through, the energy goes right through from the damp grass, green, chlorophyll, 528 frequency. You walk, and suddenly now you're uplifted, you're spiritually energized, and you're actually grounded, because that's what the grounding does. Now, we have in my store, in healthyworldstore.com, and in your store, you have the energy cleaner. See, now my most recent research, not only have I been enjoying the energy cleaner, and I use it every night, as again, because I had the destruction of my spinal vertebrae, I'm reconstructing, recalcifying, and healing every single day for the last 2 years in my therapy. Progress is being made every single day. Every single day. One thing I just did before this show, I walked for a half an hour. Actually, I danced for a half an hour.
All right.
I had 528 radio playing on my wireless.
Right.
And I'm walking around 2 mile circle, rocking and rolling.
Way to
enjoying the oldies and goodies that I selected. There's 1,700 tracks from 528radio.com you can listen to for free. There's no commercials. I love it. And I'm dancing along the neighborhood. And people and the neighbors go, "Oh, there's Dr. Horowitz dancing. Look at him." Whereas they say, "Dr. Horowitz, I can't even believe it. You were walking with a walker. I couldn't get out of bed for 3 months."
That's right.
So that's what this does. God does this naturally, miraculously. And in fact, the 528 frequency in the original musical scale is the miracle note. Today it's do, re, mi. Mi in Latin is miragistorum. That's in English, miracles. It's the miracle note of the original musical scale. I'm giving a presentation coming up the end of June on the Cape Cod. And it's titled, "You Are the Music." You are the music. We are endowed with music. Our souls are programmed. Get that one.
Really.
Your soul, with all your gifts and blessings and anointings, and even potentially your destiny and fulfilling your passions, is programmed musically, mathematically, just like I'm talking about. So that's why we love music. We have to have music. We're musical beings. And so this is the whole concept now. Apply that in therapeutics, apply that in medicine, and you have a complete paradigm shift, a total shattering of the stupid slash, burn, and poison approach to healthcare. That's insane. When you consider the fact that you are a spiritual being first before a physical being, you can watch YouTube presentations right now when the egg is fertilized by a sperm in the womb. Suddenly, miraculously, there's an explosion of energy, and you see zinc pouring out and light pouring out. That is the inception. That's why the Christian community is correct. You know, you can't get into this whole concept of pro-life versus pro-choice. The fact of the matter is that yes, life and spirituality exists instantly. And if you're going to kill a fetus, then basically you're really stopping that whole process, and nobody talks about that. Nobody even thinks about that. And that's a sad, sick state of affairs, showing how stupid we are as human beings and how dumbed down we have been, particularly by the drug cartel that makes money off of us being susceptible and gullible and stupid.
They do. It's a multi-trillion-dollar business, the pharmaceutical industry, isn't it, sir?
Yes, absolutely. And look what's happening. You know, every day or so, we're seeing class action lawsuits. That look what just happened. What's in the headline news as we speak is Bayer Corporation and Monsanto are basically being dealt $1 billion class action lawsuit settlement for their poisonous chemicals, the poisonous insecticides and herbicides, the Roundup. And so this is, again, you have to go back when you understand, you know, again, a diversion, distraction, deception is this whole concept that the Trump administration are Nazis by the woke left. Just actually tonight on my Substack account, John, I'll send you the link to a new video I've just produced dealing with this issue of how stupid our sports superstars have become and how they're being played as shills for the pharmaceutical cartel. Southern poverty laws in the news right now for giving Nazis money as they foment racial hate in America. All of this is a behavioral science ploy. Study behavioral science, folks. If you realize you want to know what really makes society tick, it's media. Media persuasion, messaging, programming by the anchors that anchor you right into that behavior, that insanity, that stupidity. So this is really where, you know, we then transition out of that. You do what Jesus said. Come out of her, my people, lest you be infected by her insanity, hypocrisy, and plagues. You come out of that insanity and you grasp the truth and the way, which is what Jesus was talking about, which is what we're talking about now. The way, you have the truth, you then practice the spiritual aspects of the way to health and healing, then you have life. Jesus says, I'm the truth, I'm the way of the life. Nobody's going to come to the Father without going through the truth, the way, and the life. Wow, what a magnificent revelation, particularly for the dumbed-down Christian community that has just been totally decimated. As bad as any of the native populations, the Indian populations. I'm dealing with issues in Hawaii. Look at what happened to the native Hawaiians. This whole insanity, this corruption, and this money that makes the world go round.
And you retards believed me.
That's what, you know, Jesus was saying about this is hard to get somebody into heaven. You know, it's like putting through a camel through the eye of a needle. You can't do it. It's just like they're sold out. In essence, they've lost their souls to the money. They lost their souls. And they'll say anything. Look at Comey right now. These people are gone. Look at the woke mob. Look at what Tim Walz has been up to. Look at what all the Democrat woke promoters have been engaged in. Insanity. We, the normal, reasonable, common sense people, can't even relate to this insanity.
No, we can't.
And because it's missing the fundamentals of what really life is about, and healing, particularly healthcare, is really about.
Absolutely. Well, Doctor, where we go from here, I encourage everybody to keep their head on a swivel, continue to gain knowledge, and to not accept any vaccine for any reason. How about you, Doctor?
Absolutely, yeah. As a matter of fact, give you a preview of what I'm publishing tonight. Southern Poverty Law, that's supposed to be the advocates of the black community, has been in the news for financing Nazis, the Nazi movement,
right,
and the KKK movement, right?
That's right.
So, who did they rely on largely in order to promote voters' rights for the black community, the underserved black community, right? Ill black community, because the blacks are typically at higher risk for all sorts of diseases because of socioeconomic issues, socioeconomic barriers. So they chose LeBron James from the Lakers,
right,
in the playoffs as a superhero, modeling for all the youth, all the black youth in the community, how to look at black lives that matter and vote for the dimwit, woke jerks that Southern Poverty Law Center and the Lakers staff heavily finances, exclusively finances. They don't finance any Republicans. They finance this insanity. Why? Because they're part of the divide and conquer. Black versus white, rich versus poor, gay versus straight, black versus white. You've got the Muslim versus Jew. You've got Christian versus Gentile. It's just divide, conquer, conquer, conquer. And that's why we're conquered, because the media is persuading us to accept this insanity. So now, what I'm putting out right now is showing you, do you remember that Bronny James, LeBron James's son, suddenly collapsed?
Yes.
On the basketball court? Do you
COVID.
remember how many times have you on our Thursday show talked about the young men and the athletes and all these other people that
Multiple
suddenly
times.
keel over?
Multiple times.
Keel over.
Soccer players, top athletes, right?
Exactly. So apparently, in my estimation, my conclusion, Bronny James fell out because of the clot shot.
Very likely. Yep.
Yeah. And that instead of telling us the truth, everything that you've heard, folks listening during this segment, that you have the New York Times, the woke New York Times, corrupt as sin. They say, oh, he had apparently a congenital heart defect.
Undetected.
Undetected.
Right.
No mention of the clot shot possibility, no mention of the science that proves that this is the highest risk for young athletes when they take a clot shot and the vaccine boosters. Suddenly now they are falling out.
Well,
so
I got some comments on that. Before 2021, it'd be a high school freshman football player that had an undetected heart condition that would collapse and die on the football field as a freshman in high school. And that was national news because it was such a rare occasion. Now, an undetected heart condition, you might get by with that as a elementary school person, but you won't get past your freshman year in any high-level athlete activity without it being detected. By the time you're a senior in high school, of course it's going to be detected. You're not going to become a college athlete, let alone a professional athlete, with an undetected heart condition. That's not going to happen as a doctor.
Right, yeah. Again, the censorship in medicine and health care. And my previous video, folks, if you want to watch my videos, subscribe to my Substack account, Dr. Leonard G. Horowitz on Substack. You can also we're updating now, revolutiontelevision.net. You can go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Leonard G. Horowitz. You have to put it all in a search because YouTube doesn't like promoting my work. So you got to put it into the search engine in YouTube, Dr. Leonard G. Horowitz, spelled out. Then you'll see my most recent videos deal a lot with what we're talking about now. The gross, disgusting, despicable, deadly, unconscionable censorship taking us away with Maha Now we're supposed to have Kennedy making America healthy again. It ain't going to happen if you don't tell the truth about vaccination intoxications and deadly vaccines and the stupidity in medicine that could be using frequency therapeutics instead of poisonous drugs with all these side effects. And then on top of that, as evidence to this, all you have to do is watch the evening news. Almost every commercial in prime time, drugs. And what do they tell you? In a 60-second ad, not because they have to by law, no. They don't have to have on the side of like cigarettes a label that says, warning, causes cancer, may cause cancer. No, they don't have to do that. But in a 60-second ad on television now, probably 20, 30 seconds, almost half of it is all the terrible side effects that you're going to get by taking this drug as directed. My goodness, what is that about? It's exactly what I'm saying. It is stupefying. It is causing the population to accept disease induced by drugs as normal.
That's right.
So basically, we're subject to the social engineering of the pharmaceutical cartel. The mass media mind-controlling pharmaceutical cartel is the essence of what's making us sick, and it is the main block to us actually evolving our consciousness appropriately. And now that's critical, particularly at this time where artificial intelligence and robotics is advancing at light speed, taking over jobs, taking over industries. My goodness, where do we, the people, stand unless we come to terms with this urgent, most important intelligence provided in this intelligence report? We're in sad shape, as Elon Musk says, potentially facing extinction of our species from stupidity.
Doctor, I want to thank you very much. We're pretty much out of time here. I will see you tomorrow on my regular show.
Excellent, John. All right. Great to join
Thank
you.
you very much. My regular show is Monday through Friday, 0700 to 1000 hours on Republic Broadcasting. Everything's linked from my website, thelibertyman.com. We have great guests and great callers, and I encourage everybody to check out the show Monday through Friday, 7 to 10 Central Time.
Handle the depopulation. It's efficient. Brilliant! Can it start with my X? Genius! We'll call it the Final Exit app and make it a subscription service. Recurring revenue from extinction.